Hello, and welcome to my very first tutorial on how to install Ubuntu Linux Server Edition onto your Windows machine or your Apple machine. The first thing I recommend is at the bottom right of these videos is there's a little gear, and I recommend you click that and select the quality of the video to 720p. This will help once I start sharing my screen so the text is crisper and you're able to read things better during these tutorials. Okay, the first thing I want to do is share my screen, and let me make sure I do this right this time. Okay, so you now should see my Windows 8 machine. Now this works with Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows with OS X. And we're going to use Oracle's VirtualBox. Now the first thing we want to check is to make sure our processor is fairly new and it has something called virtualization setting actually working for this machine. So the first thing we're going to do is click the Start menu, right click on my computer, and go to Properties. And that's the same way for Windows 7. Now it'll tell you all this information about your machine. And let's load up a web browser and type in the chipset we use. So I'm using an A74750HQ. You can actually see I typed that in before. Click this first link, and if you scroll all the way down to the bottom under Advanced Technologies, you'll see that it supports VTX, and it says yes here. So you basically want to make sure your processor supports virtualization. Otherwise, this is going to be super slow when you do this tutorial. It is still possible to do this, but you're looking at probably between 2 and 3 hours to install, maybe even longer to install Ubuntu Linux. If you don't have this virtualization technology. Now if you do here, the first thing you want to do is reboot the machine, go into the BIOS. The BIOS is a blue screen usually, and you can usually get into it using F1, F2, delete, F10 even. I've even seen escape. So just look for the way to get into the BIOS. You want to make sure that you have this virtualization technology turned on. Most Intel-based laptops, and desktops for that matter, have this virtualization technology turned off even though the Intel chip supports it. AMD also has this feature, so if you just search for your AMD chip, it should say something about virtualization. I recommend you also check the BIOS in case it's disabled by default. You want to make sure this is on, and I'll actually show you how to check once we get Oracle VirtualBox installed. So let's get started with that. So let's go to Google. I'm going to search Oracle VirtualBox, and this is a free piece of software that enables you to run the Ubuntu Linux Server Edition on your machine. So if you click Downloads and then select this here and then click Save. I actually have this already downloaded, so I don't actually have to download it again. So the next thing we want to download is the Ubuntu Server Edition. So we want to go to ubuntu.com, and you want to click Server, and you can click Overview here, and then click Download Ubuntu Server. Now there's always two versions of Ubuntu. There's an LTS, which stands for Long-Term Support. I always recommend this version unless you need something in this next version up. The reason I recommend this LTS is it's supported for 5 years. So Ubuntu Server came out in 2014. It's supported to 2019. So once you put this on a server, you don't actually have to upgrade Linux until 2019 on this box. If you install this version, it's usually only supported between 6 and 9 months. It actually says 9 months here. 9 months is not very long. The last thing you want to be doing is redoing your production servers every 9 months, especially if you have many of them. So I definitely recommend this LTS. So you want to click download here. And actually I have this already installed or downloaded as well. And basically it says you're going to download Ubuntu 14.04.1 server AMD64.ISO. Don't worry that it says AMD. It means it's 64-bit and it will run on your machine. If you actually look here at the first screen we looked at, we're actually running a 64-bit operating system. If yours says 32-bit here, you may need to get the 32-bit version of the ISO. And it's very easy to do that if you just go to google.com. It's actually easier to find through Google. If you go Ubuntu server 1404 32-bit. And this first link comes up, this releases.ubuntu, and you can actually do so server install images, and you want this link right here for the 32-bit. 32-bit and where it says i386, that's the same. When it says AMD 64, that's 64-bit. I know that's very confusing that you see. Also, x86 is the same as 32-bit here. I know it's very confusing that they say different things, but basically the rule of thumb is x86 is 32-bit as well as i386. If you see AMD 64, it's 64-bit. Okay. So let's get started installing Oracle's VirtualBox. So let's look at the downloads. Double click this. Hit OK. Next, I installed the C drive. I don't create a quick launch bar. I put it on the desktop, it's fine. Now there's a big warning here. Network interfaces will be restarted. Basically, you will lose your internet connection briefly during this installation. If you're downloading Ubuntu at the same time, wait. Or if you're doing anything else, wait till you're done with that before you click yes here, or you will screw up the downloads. So just forewarning. So click yes, install. Okay, let's start the Oracle VirtualBox. Okay, come down here. So now that we have this VirtualBox installed, let's go to New, and we're going to do a Ubuntu server 1404 64-bit. You can actually see the type here is Linux automatically changed and the version changed here. You want to select 32-bit here if you're using the 32-bit. So let's click Next. Now it's going to ask you how much RAM you want to give the machine. You can give it as little as, I recommend, between 512 and 4 gigs of RAM. If you have more to give it, the faster the machine will run. Typically I use something in the middle. So 2 gigs is 2048 megs. So click Next. Create a virtual hard drive now. Click Create. This VDI virtual disk image is fine. Click Next. Now this is a cool feature of the VirtualBox. Dynamically allocated basically means that the file that is storing our virtual machine will grow automatically as it needs more space. So what's nice about this is that you can give it more space. You don't want your virtual machine to run out of space, so it's good to give it a lot of space. But what's not good is you don't want to take up all that space right away. So dynamic allocation will actually make the file grow automatically as it needs. So I do dynamic there. And here I give my virtual machine 20 gigabytes. Now it's not going to use all 20, but it'll start, I think last time I checked it was like 1.6 gigabytes out of 20. So this is really nice to use. You don't want your virtual machine running out of space because you'll have to redo it all over again, and it's a pain. Okay, next step. We can check here that it says acceleration. That you want to make sure it says that if you expect to use acceleration on your machine. If you don't have that there, it's going to be super slow. So, forewarning. If it doesn't say it there, I recommend stopping this video and checking all the settings we did. Make sure the BIOS has it. Make sure your chip supports it. There's one other caveat. If you use Hyper-V, which is a similar program to this VirtualBox, Oracle VirtualBox for Windows, I don't believe you can have Hyper-V and Oracle VirtualBox installed at the same time. at the same time. So if you know what Hyper-V is, I recommend removing it if you're going to use VirtualBox. Since not all Windows versions come with Hyper-V, which is disappointing, I believe it's only the Pro and Ultimate versions come with Hyper-V. I recommend Oracle VirtualBox because it'll run on all operating systems, including Apple's OS X. Okay, so let's click Start here. Okay, and now it's going to say, where is the Ubuntu ISO that we downloaded? So you want to click that, and you want to click Downloads, and here's the Ubuntu installation ISO. And click Open, and then click Start. Now from this point forward, this is exactly how it would look if you were installing Linux on a production server. So it's actually good to practice this many times if you're a system administrator. You can actually practice installing the newest version of an operating system, including other ones that you may have not used before in the past, like CentOS is another one that is free and open source. But anyway, let's continue here. That's English, and I want to do install Ubuntu server. Now one thing that's a little strange is once the mouse is clicked inside here, it's set to focus inside here, and it's actually telling you at the bottom that it's capturing the mouse and pointer integration. So at the bottom right here it says the right control. So if you hit the right control on your keyboard, not the left one, only the right one, you'll see that change, and then the mouse comes out to the box outside that box again. It'll basically lock your mouse inside there when you click inside this box again. Whoops. So now it's locked in there again. So hit Control and it'll come back out. So that's how you switch between the focus of this VirtualBox and get back out. And sometimes it comes in and out, and it's strange how it operates, but if you're having problems getting back to Windows, just hit Control and you'll have it back out. Okay, let's continue on. I want English, United States. I don't detect the keyboard layout, and I just use English US, English US. You'll know if you need to change those for your specific keyboard, but the defaults are pretty much straightforward for US-based keyboards. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is it's going to prompt you for the username and the password you want to create. Now, typically, I just select, I'll show you here in a second. Actually, we're going to do hostname first. So hostname is a very important aspect of your machine. It's basically what your machine is named. So I usually do dev01 for development. You want to make sure when you're connecting to different machines that, hey, this machine's production, this machine's development, this machine might be a staging, or even if you have multiple staging environments, you just want to make sure you always know which machine you're connected to. If it's a production machine, you want to know right away. So I usually do dev01 for my development machine. Okay, now it's going to ask me for my full name. I just use Ubuntu here. And now it's going to ask me for the username for the account, and I just use Ubuntu here too. You can use whatever you want here. Just make sure you remember it. And the reason I use Ubuntu here is because typically, if you've used any of the cloud-based services, Amazon Web Service is the most popular one that I've used all the time. They default to a user installed on there called Ubuntu. So I started using Ubuntu on my development machines here too. And it's just easier to remember that Ubuntu is the user as opposed to a different name that you may not have in the Amazon Web Services. But anyway, you can use whatever you want. I use Ubuntu. Now pick a strong password. Usually a couple numbers and over 8 characters will be strong. I don't recommend encrypting your home directory. Every time the machine boots, it's going to ask you for your password to decrypt your home directory. If you're administrating servers that are remotely and you have to reboot them, it's going to prompt you for your password if it's encrypted. So you don't want that since you're not actually sitting at the terminal when you reboot servers remotely. So I usually do no here. Auto detects my time zone, which is Chicago. The next part is how to set up the hard drive. Basically, the hard drive is the virtualization file you set up for VirtualBox. I just use guided use entire disk, and that's the easiest one. There's no other settings for that. You just hit enter again. Now the default file system for Ubuntu Linux server is ext4. If you're familiar with Windows, it's called NTFS. Swap is if you run out of RAM, it will use some of the hard drive for RAM. And we can talk about all that later in another tutorial, but this is pretty much the easiest setup for the hard drives on a Ubuntu installation. So we go left and click yes to write those changes to disk. So this will take a little bit to install, but this is actually a lot faster when you have the acceleration, the virtualization stuff installed. I didn't have it the first time I did this demo, and it was very, very slow. Okay, so the next thing it's going to talk about is this proxy setting. Unless you're in a big company and your internet is very, very restricted, chances are you don't have a proxy. If you do think you're doing this in a business with restricted internet, ask your sysadmin if you can have the username and password for the proxy. He may not even give it to you, so forewarning about that. So I just hit continue here as long as your machine is just connected to a normal internet. %99 of the time you don't have a proxy. So the next thing it's going to do is prompt us for a huge list of extra packages we can install. Just like Windows, there's tons and tons of software that is available for Linux. Now, what's nice about Linux is that it's all free. Let's talk about updates first. Sorry about that. So here, this is a new feature of Ubuntu Server. I don't recommend automatic updates. I recommend running updates all the time. Never stop running updates on your Linux machines. Too many times I see companies ignore updates, which is very, very bad. But I don't recommend automatic updates, and the reason why is, say you're working on a big project and you're coding all this stuff up, and all of a sudden the following day the same code doesn't work, and you don't know why. One of the reasons it could be is because it automatically ran updates. Now, 99% of the time that does not happen, but it could happen. Another thing that happens during automatic updates is automatic restarting of some services. So like if you're doing something during the update and it restarts, say, your database connection, it may screw it up and restart that service underneath you. So my recommendation is no automatic updates, but also do do updates frequently. We're actually going to do it the second this machine comes online. So we're going to do no automatic updates there. Now this was the software I was talking about. Now this is all free software, and you can, if you know what this stuff is, you're welcome to check box these with the space bar and select them. But for the time being, I'm not going to select any of them, and I'm going to show you how to install software once we get inside the Linux Ubuntu server. Okay, we're actually almost done with the installation of Ubuntu Server Edition. And it actually doesn't take that long when you have fairly fast machines. Most of the time actually was me talking during the installation. If you do this a number of times, you'll usually between 20 and 30 minutes total to get from start to finish on a installation of Ubuntu Server. It is a pretty typical time. Okay, this is the last step, and it should tell us, oh, there's one more step called should we install grub to the master boot record? And I always pick yes here. I've never actually picked no here. This is what helps make the machine boot, and I just click yes or hit enter to hit yes. You'll know if you don't install it to the master boot record. That's our very, very specialized setups, and I've actually never had to do that. So let's say continue, and we're actually done with the installation of Ubuntu. And now it's going to reboot the virtual machine. And all this stuff will scroll by. And as long as it says login here, the machine has started correctly. I'm going to do switch to scale mode and try to resize this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it and not let it snap to the top. Okay. So let's log in here. Okay, the first thing you'll notice here is it says welcome to Ubuntu 14.04 LTS and a bunch of other stuff, and it's kind of daunting when you first see this for the first time. Don't worry about any of this, just type clear, press enter. I may make another tutorial on what all that means, but for the most part you don't need to know right now. So the first thing I said I was going to do is run updates. So let's do that. So to run updates on Ubuntu Linux, you do sudo apt get update. And this is basically checking for updates, just like you would check for updates on Windows. It is not downloading any updates, and it is not installing any updates. That is a separate command. The reason you have to use sudo, and sudo is basically saying take whatever's after it and run it as a privileged user. And the most privileged user on a Linux machine is called root, R-O-O-T. If you're familiar with Windows, it's an administrator account on Windows. So similar to, so like root and administrator are essentially the same user. One's on Linux, one's on Windows. So it's going to ask you for your password. And now this is just checking and getting a list of the current packages that need to be updated. Now the next command, we can do clear again. We can do sudo apt get upgrade. And this is basically, as soon as you press enter, it's going to tell you all the packages that need to be updated. So it says 95 need to be upgraded at the bottom here, and it says 43 megs, which actually is pretty small. You're going to just hit yes, enter. One nice thing about Linux is the patch management is, I think, 10 times better than Windows. As soon as this is done, you will want to reboot the machine when it does kernel upgrades. And I'll show you how to tell if it did a kernel update at the end. But once you reboot it once, the machine is fully up to date and it's ready to go. If you've ever done Windows administration, there are multiple times you log in and run updates and reboot, and you have to do that many, many times in order to get a machine fully up to date. The other thing that's nice that I really like about Linux is that the updates are usually a lot smaller. You could spend hours and hours downloading updates for Windows. Usually Linux is significantly faster since the packages are a lot smaller. And just like that, the machine's updated. And it's unbelievable. I mean, that was like 30 seconds from start to finish on how long it took to update. So if you ever done a Windows machine, that's a lot different. Okay, right at the bottom here it said generating boot init trd.img 3.13 blah 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 blah. Basically that means it said I got a new kernel, I installed it, you should reboot. So we want to do clear and do sudo reboot. And once this machine comes up, it'll be fully patched and ready for us to start using it. And I'll actually show you there's no more packages to install. Because it may be hard to believe if you're coming from a Windows environment. Oops, if I put in the right password. You can hit the up arrow key to bring back any commands you typed in before. So I can up arrow and then just do upgrade. And as you can see, 0 upgraded. There's no more packages to update or upgrade at this time. This machine is fully up to date. Okay, so the next thing we want to sorry, something fell behind me. The next thing we want to do is fix the network on this machine. Now, even though this machine is running through a virtual machine, it has a weird IP address. So if you do if config here, it says 10.0.2.15 right here under 2 lines down. This is init ADDR 10.0.2.15. Now if you look at the Windows machine, so if you click the start menu and type in CMD enter, and you type ipconfig, so Windows is ipconfig, on Ubuntu Server Edition it's ifconfig, ifconfig. So you can see if I scroll all the way up here, and I can mark this. So this one's 192.168.1.106. Now, if you know anything about networking, you know that these two are not in the same IP range, which is a little strange if you're just starting out. If you actually come down here and do ping 10.0.2.15, it actually cannot get to your virtual machine, which is aggravating. So let's fix that. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn off my virtual machine, and you do sudo shutdown -h now. It's basically saying turn off the server right now. Okay, let's minimize this. You want to right click on this and go to settings and go to network. And you can see here it's using NAT, and I don't actually want it to use NAT. I'm going to use a bridge adapter, and I have 3 network adapters on this machine. 2 Cat5s, which are the wired connections, and 1 wireless connection. So I'm actually using this USB one right now. So I'm going to hit OK. And you want to pick which one you're using. If you're using wireless, you should pick wireless there. Now let's start the virtual machine. And you'll see that it got a totally different IP address this time, similar to the one that's running on the Windows side of the world. So just like that, I got 101. So now if I come back here, let's shrink this down a little bit. If I do ping 192.168.1.101, you can see now it has access to this machine. Now the reason this is important is because most of the time I am remoting into the Ubuntu server with a program called Putty. So if you load up Firefox or Chrome or IE and go to google.com, search Putty, and click this top link, and if you scroll down you have putty.exe. And actually I have this on my desktop already here. So I use Putty to connect to my remote and my local virtual machines. It's just a lot easier to use than this this virtual machine window. It has more features. So I just do clear, and I'm actually type exit here, and now I'm back at the prompt, and I'm just going to minimize this. But now I'm going to connect to it through here, so we can go. Actually, sorry, we have to install a package in order to connect to this machine. So let's log back in and do sudo apt get install SSH. Now basically this is saying we want this to be an SSH server. Okay, let's clear, exit, minimize this. Now we can do Ubuntu at 192.168.101, which is the IP address of our virtual machine. The first time you ever connect to a remote system like this, it doesn't know the security key on it. So you will get this warning. As long as you know it's a new machine, most of the time you can just click yes and it'll let you through. So don't be turned off by that first initial security thing. So let's put in our password here. Okay, so now we're actually inside the remote, this VirtualBox right here through this new program called Putty. And what I really like about Putty is immediately you can right-click on here and go duplicate session. And it'll just immediately log into the same machine again. And now we have two terminals into the same machine, and now I can do stuff on the right here, and I can do stuff on the left and right. So that's what I really like about Putty. The other nice thing about Putty is that if you need to start writing down the commands for Linux, because I know it's a daunting task to try to remember all these commands, especially if you're new to this. So I recommend creating like a Google Doc with command sheets that help you out to remember some of these commands. Like, oh, how do I shut down the machine? I don't remember that command. You go to the Google Doc and look for. You make two columns. The first column is the command, and the second column is what it does. So I would look for shut down the machine. Oh, it's sudo shutdown -h now. And over time, you'll learn the commands, but it is very helpful to store a Google Doc of commands. Okay, one of the last things I want to show you before this tutorial is finished is that Python is the main programming language I actually use on all these open source softwares. and it's actually already installed on here. So you can just type Python and press enter. And you'll see right away that we're using Python 2.7.6. There's a Python 3, and many people will tell you to use Python 3. I'm going to teach mostly Python 2 for now. The reason why is most of my programs are still Python 2. Unfortunately, I have not converted a lot of them to Python 3 yet. The community and I are slowly getting to Python 3. It's going to take another couple years to do that, but for the meantime, I will teach Python 2, and once I start getting more into Python 3, I'll start teaching Python 3 exclusively. But most of the knowledge you'll learn in Python 2 will carry over to Python 3. Don't feel like, oh, I have to go to 3 right away. Some people may say just start with 3, but there's some stuff out there that still is only Python 2. And it's very frustrating when you run into it as a new programmer. You're like, why doesn't this work? Well, it's only for Python 2. But anyway, that's part of the... Python 2 is also supported, I believe, for the net till 2020. So we still have 15 more years before Python 2 goes away. And even then, I have a feeling that it'll still be supported beyond that. So that's one thing that's really nice about Python, is that it's going to be supported for a very, very long time. So the first thing you do on any programming language is print out hello world. You just do print hello world. And then you press enter. And anything between these two quote marks will automatically print out to the terminal. Now, I'll show you another cool trick here with the way Putty works. Let's go over here, and we can run Python over here. And now we have two terminals loaded with Python. Say I need one command from here to here. As soon as you select this text, it's copied to the clipboard with Putty. Then you come over here and you right-click, and it immediately pastes it. And as long as you don't have a space at the beginning, like so. Let me redo this one more time. See how it's grabbing that space at the beginning? You don't want that. So I selected it. I come over here, right-click, and now there's no space. You press enter, it works. So you can see that spaces at the beginning are important in Python. And this is how an error works. It actually tells you indentation error. So I'll come back here and we can do print Dan Scheffner. We can do print, come and follow me on Twitter. I wonder if this will work with the @ symbol. We'll find out. Yep, okay. Sometimes there are special characters like the @ symbol. We'll get to that in a later tutorial, but I'm glad that it worked. So let me know if let me switch back to the video. You can see behind me that the sheet I hung up to block out the sun for these videos is flying like crazy because of the wind, because the window's open. And that was all the noise in the middle of the video, if you heard it. Well, thanks for watching this tutorial. Please subscribe and follow me on Twitter and on my YouTube channel. I'll be making tons of these videos coming up. If you have any questions or comments or aspects of these videos that you're like, wow, you just went way too fast when you did this certain thing, or you needed more explanation on something, just post in the comments and we'll help you out. And thanks for watching, and talk to everyone soon.